Welcome to Budget Outlaws. My name is Andrew, and today we're going to be going over how I mounted my Audi Turbo engine and transmission into my 73 914 Porsche. For mounting the engine and transmission, we first started with the original Audi mounting brackets and engine mounts. The mounts are an aftermarket high-density mount, but don't produce excess vibration. Next, I jacked up the engine, bolted a 2-inch by 1/4-inch plate to the original mount, and with about 8 inches to spare on each side, put a 1.5 by 120 wall DOM tube mounted as close to the oil pan as I could. I should have offset this slightly and made one side higher, but it still worked. I next removed the factory engine tin shelf used for sealing the top of the air-cooled motor from the bottom. I did this for extra room and cleanliness. Plus, it was probably all about 3 pounds of steel. I mounted the engine to the transmission and rolled it into place in the car and dropped the car in place. I then lined up the transmission in the middle of the car and the CV joints in line with the wheels. Now, while I would have like to have the engine move forward about 6 inches further, this would have caused quite some binding with the CV joints. This is something that a friend of mine had an issue with on his conversion, and the axle flanges kept popping out of the transmission due to so much angle. Now, with the engine mocked up, this let me know that I needed to take out the rear firewall, or at least most of it. So I mocked up where I wanted to run my cuts with some blue tape, and I left the upper portion of the firewall, basically where the seal ran, so that I would still have enough room to put the target top in the back. I also reinforced the shock tower where I made the cuts, knowing that I had cut out some structural rigidity. This was only a temporary measure till I could build up the firewall back up. But 4 years later, it's still temporary and there's still a hole there. I took this time to weld in some reinforcements to the shock tower and the rear trailing arm ears. The shock tower reinforcements was an experiment, but the trailing arm ears are a much needed reinforcement. Part of the trailing arm reinforcement that's typically done on race cars is bracing it to the lower firewall from the trailing arm mount ear. Now for the front engine mount, I decided to mount the body mount straight to the factory mount on the 1/4-inch plate and make it bolt on and off with some 1/2-inch bolts. This will make some sense when you see a few different angles of it, so just keep watching. After finalizing the mounting location of the engine and double checking to make sure that I had the transmission perfectly centered between the trailing arms, I tied into the trailing arm bar that I had mentioned earlier and mounted to the 1/4-inch plate that I had previously mentioned. Now, the pictures might look like a hack job of steel holding everything in place, and well, good, because that's exactly what it is. But it works, and the crossbar doubles as a chassis brace. So let's move on to the rear of the car and the mounting of the transmission to the body. I wanted to use the original 914 transmission mounts, or at least the original mounting locations. So what I did was, when I made the shift linkage mounting, I made it excessively strong so that with a couple of extra bolts and tied to the transmission, I could use most of the bracing for the transmission mount on that side. Now, did you notice the problem yet? Well, the linkage arm is way too close to the transmission mount. There's one surefire way to fix the clearance problem, and that's to remove the problem, or simply move it over 2 inches. Since I was making my own transmission mount, it didn't really matter that I was moving this over. With all that out of the way, I can add a tube from the mess of steel that I welded to points on the transmission side to the 1/4-inch plate and just weld it up. The other side was extremely easy. All I am doing here is bolting a single piece of steel to the transmission and then welding from that piece to where I needed it with the tube. Straight lines and triangulate. Finally, I pulled the engine and transmission out and add one more brace to the driver's side rear transmission mount, and it's solid. And here is the engine mounted in place. Now the intake manifold is very close to the top of the trunk, but I wanted to move the engine up as much as possible for ground clearance. I hope you got a sense of what was going on here and the simple approach that I took towards the mounting of the engine and transmission. It was just a matter of making sure that everything lined up and then just welding steel till it was solid. It was not very difficult at all. I spent most of the time just making sure that the CVs were appropriately in line with everything and at just a slight angle so that they wouldn't ride on the same bearing spots. That was pretty much it. That's all I really did for locating the engine and transmission. Okay guys, and here is the final iteration. You can see everything's painted, kind of finished up a little bit, but everything's kind of braced. There's no weld on that side, but it's on the other side, because that's not a very high requirement for stress, but this is it. It's very simple. I'm going to continue on the other side. And then here's the rear trailing arm, and you can see a lot of dirt there, but chopped off and capped the crossbar. You can see how close it comes to the actual engine lower oil pan. You can see a couple bolts holding it in place, and then that piece going to the bar, and that's it. Now, the next video on the orange 914 My Car is going to be in regards to the radiator setup. I'm also going to go into the intercooler, the electric water pump that I used, and the temperature controller that I used for the intercooler. I did a air to water intercooler, and that's it. So thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoy, and make sure that you click on the like and subscribe button if you have not already subscribed to the channel. Thanks so much for your guys' support. Really appreciate it. See ya.